Good morning. Please come on in and join us. Our next presentation is starting. We are proud to present Aidan Walden. He's the Manager Cloud Architecture and Engineering for Fortinet. Please give him a warm welcome.
Hey, good afternoon. All right, this is on. I appreciate you guys taking the time to come to this session. And again, my name is Aidan Walden, and I work with our cloud architecture and engineering team, responsible for AWS deployments. And the topic today is security relative to IoT and specific to the cloud. And we look at IoT as a segment. It's a good reference for us generally, as it was really a segment born in the cloud. People think of IoT and the endpoint devices, but when we talk about IoT security, it really centers around the cloud. And I actually start with a consideration of Julius Caesar in our security discussion. So, if you know Julius, he was a great tactician. He had the love of the plebes. He was an effective commander of his armies. But his downfall was actually he was undone by the lack of awareness of the threat that was closest to him, the people that he trusted most. And so for many venturing into the cloud, they're much like Julius. You have great ideas, you have great intentions, the end users love the experience that cloud provides. But so many operating in the cloud don't realize or appreciate the threats facing them. And developers who are most concerned about getting products to market are not thinking about the underlying security of the infrastructure. In fact, they may just assume that the infrastructure has taken care of security, right? And so at the end of the day, the lack of visibility and the lack of threat intelligence is a pitfall to the good work being done in the cloud. You know, IoT is an industry that, as I said, was born in the cloud. It provides us lessons and case studies for addressing security in the cloud. Industry 4.0 is a term that is defined as cyber-physical systems that are decentralized and cloud-based. So this covers IoT, it covers automation, it covers a lot of the human-to-machine interfaces, the HMIs, these payment processing systems, social media, etc. And the stark problem statements in IoT, and more broadly the Internet of Everything, are very likely the same ones that you're facing, right? Network perimeters that are highly dynamic. They're no longer well-defined. You have varying levels of trust across your network. You're managing and trying to secure remote connections. These could be IoT devices, maybe not. Maybe it's BYOD, maybe it's extranets, etc. You're dealing with PII, personal identifiable information, and if you're a telco, CPNI. And you're trying to understand what are all the regulatory requirements imposed upon you in the different regions that you operate. And you're dealing with things like certificate and key management and how to effectively distribute application functions in a way that is most secure. And so these problem statements represent tremendous complexity, and the solutions can be complex. But the irony of all this is that for a threat actor, the cloud, they're not starting with complex attacks in the cloud. It's the idea of what was old is new again, right? And what we see at Fortinet is that day in and day out, attackers are finding the cloud really easy to compromise because the basic blocking and tackling is not done. And the fact that hacking has become this multi-tier economy with layers of resale and distribution where data is money, it doesn't take a sophisticated attacker to execute a sophisticated attack. And so hacking, it's much like, or as they say, it's hacking like it's 1999. They're using the common tools that you use, and they're using those against you. Things like PowerShell, SSH, RDP. A lot of implementations that we see at Fortinet, what people say is, you know, hey, I've got ACLs, I've got security groups, I've got layer 3, layer 4 firewalling. What do I need beyond that? But what happens is we see social engineering and phishing as the initial attack vectors. And these attack vectors are actually beachhead efforts that lead to more complex attacks. Rootkits, bots, customized 0 days. They're leveraging tools like Nmap to recon your cloud. They're using Metasploit to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in unpatched systems. So how do we limit the attack exposure? How do we prevent these threats? Oops. Oh, wow. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Bear with me. Bear with me. Yeah. So, yeah. Sorry about that. So, there's first thing we have to do the basics, right? Things like limiting your exposure, limit ICMP response, implement multi-factor authentication, secure CloudWatch and logging systems, limit exposure of VPC, development VPCs to the public internet, and so once we address these things, we can start to look at some of the more complex scenarios. And so I'm going to move into 2 specific things that you would take away as a best practice. The first is implementing segmentation. Now, hackers are focused on lateral east-west expansion, right? Internal segmentation will lock an intruder from moving laterally if they happen to gain entry into your environment. It also prevents them from bypassing security, as all inter-VPC traffic flows are inspected and granted least permission. Now, visibility is specifically about insight into traffic flows in the sources, destinations, and layer 7 protocols. Now, the result of proper segmentation and the provided visibility that you gain is the opportunity to apply the right mitigation at every step in the cyber kill chain. And this is what we've diagrammed here. Right? So this table provides a reference for exploits at each phase of an attack, as well as the related defensive practices. And one thing that you'll notice, that blue bar, is that effective threat intelligence is paramount across the entire attack surface. As segmentation, I would say as segmentation is to visibility, threat intelligence is to effectiveness. And that's really the second best practice, threat intelligence. So when you're talking to an ISV, a security ISV, they should really be judged on the quality of their threat intelligence. And really, because it's the enabler for all defensive efforts. And because it keeps you protected against all of the dynamic changes or all the dynamic threats that are constantly changing. And I would be remiss if I didn't plug Fortinet in offering that we, hands down, have the industry's most robust threat intelligence service. We source from millions of nodes. We consume hundreds of third-party data feeds. And we have hundreds of threat researchers dedicated to finding new malware and preventing it. So, now, there are 4 core requirements of the cloud that Fortinet focuses on. Segmentation, I mentioned. Performance is obvious. Availability or redundancy. And, of course, security. And in talking about segmentation, I've included a reference. It should look somewhat familiar to you. You know, while true segmentation is not a reality in the cloud, the transit VPC model is a good approximation. And I mentioned earlier the IoT challenge, where segmentation is a mandate in an IoT environment. Web front ends, application services, supporting database, they should all be segmented in different broadcast domains. And not only that, you should really be implementing some sort of deep inspection, IPS, IDS, in between those segments. And just as Amazon didn't invent the personal assistant, they made it a lot better. Fortinet didn't invent this reference architecture, but through our application of security, we do make it effective. So the architecture here allows for zone-based control of resources it provides least access, and it allows for deep inspection of traffic flows. Now, keeping with the threat intel and visibility theme, this next reference looks at implementing advanced threat protection. So if you didn't hear, Fortinet announced that our Fortisandbox is now available natively in AWS, and that's actually a very big deal. Because this level of advanced integration, leveraging automated threat mitigation for unknown attacks, right? So we have a good handle on what we know is bad, we have a good handle on what we know is good, but it's like the 90% of everything in between that you have to really be worried about. And so, this involves implementing a sandbox, an execution environment in AWS to execute content and URLs to see if they're malicious. Each component, the key here is that each component in the security domain, the next-gen firewall, the WAF, the secure email gateway, possibly endpoints, they're all working cooperatively. So what you have is automatic exploit signature creation, right? Signatures are created dynamically as threats are seen, and they're distributed to all the other nodes in the security domain. So what you're doing is you're elevating your overall security posture within seconds and minutes, no longer hours, days, and months. And further, you'll notice at the top, we have the ability to deep inspect file stores through this architecture, and we can inspect extremely large files. So as content moves through your VPCs and your EC2s, we can mark them as clean or dirty. We can quarantine files and provide that inspection of your content. Now, Fortinet, at Fortinet, all of our components are integrated to provide an automated and consistent security. Our core products are currently available in the marketplace. That includes, of course, our core product, our firewall, our next-gen firewall, our web application firewall. We also have FortiSIM, which is our third-generation SIM that's available in AWS. It takes advantage of the great elasticity that offers. But we are also I'll mention this again, we're the only security vendor, the only security ISV that has an advanced threat protection offering natively in AWS today. So I'm going to return back to Caesar. So we talked about Caesar being intelligent. He was respected. But he just didn't understand. He didn't have visibility into the threats that faced him. And we look through, over time, the great innovators who provided great visibility, and we look to them as inspiration. So, Galileo was great because he looked farther than anyone else. He improved on the techniques of the day using new technology that was available to him. And Isaac Newton, of course, the prison was to him for light what deep SSL inspection is for us in HTTPS. And Phil Jackson is kind of the oddball, but I can link this in. So if you're a basketball fan, you will totally get this. Phil Jackson won 10 titles because he perfected the triangle offense. And if you're familiar with the triangle offense, its effectiveness is in how it coordinates every member of the team, everybody on the court, to act in a coordinated way and to respond to what the defense or the opposition gives you. And I liken that to Fortinet's security fabric. So our security fabric builds a context-aware, coordinated, and automated threat prevention platform that provides deep insight and reacts to attacks in real time. The security fabric is fully enabled in the public cloud on AWS. It's easily its ease of management really comes in the turnkey automation that you get. It's extensible to third parties. So when we talk about the Fortinet security fabric, we'd love you to buy everything Fortinet, but we realize that you have other partners with whom you work, and so it's extensible to them. And we can talk about that at our booth. And it provides improved security through, again, context awareness and coordination. That's key, right? So these are the advantages over legacy point products that people have typically implemented. So having said that, I encourage you to consider Fortinet for your cloud security needs, and I appreciate your time. And we are located at booth 1340. Thank you.